Welcome to this new episode, and today I'm in the company of Tayo. Hi Tayo.
Nice.
How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Very nice. So today is about water, because Tayo is a water specialist. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your background? I know you've been studying biochemistry, is that right?
Yes, I did my undergraduate degree in biochemistry in London. And then I moved to Cambodia after that, and I started to work in infection prevention and control.
Ah.
And after about 1 year, I moved here to Thailand, and I started my PhD in tropical medicine. So during this journey, I've been mainly focusing about water, and in particular on waterborne infectious diseases. And last year, just at the start of 2020, I relocated from Eastern Thailand to Northern Thailand in Mae Hong Son province.
Yeah.
And here I shifted my focus and I started looking at water more as, so I left my infectious diseases focus.
Yeah.
And I started looking at water in terms of environmental contamination. So environmental pollutants that are present in water and how this affects human health, but especially how this are implied in the growth of organic food.
Yeah, that's very interesting, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I've been to India many times, and over the years, I had a couple of bugs in India, at least. Yeah, let's call it a couple of bugs. I was very lucky because in Thailand, I never had any problem at all. Living in Koh Phangan, I think the hygiene conditions are very good here, and most people don't have any problem at all. But in India, indeed, the water quality is really challenging, and I think there's probably lots of pollutants in the environment as well, right? How is it back in the West?
It's as bad as it is here, to be honest. Here on the island, the water is pretty safe and it's pretty clean because there is no industry and there is no agriculture. So these are two major sources of water pollution. In Northern Thailand, for example, there is very intensive agriculture and this makes the water very polluted. And the same thing is can be said about the West. So water that... First, the water cycle is a closed cycle. It's not like we get new water every couple of years or months. Like the water is continuously recycled. So once we pollute the water, our current technologies are like the water works and the water treatment plants are not super effective at removing all the pollutants. So this contamination is kept within the cycle. So the surface water and the groundwater, which then are transformed into drinking water and bottled water, tap water that we get in our homes. All this water is always the same. And the major, as I said before, like the major sources of pollution are hospitals. They release a lot of hazardous waste, in terms of pharmaceuticals. And then the industry also, they release both in the air, so this will then gets trapped in the clouds and comes back through the rain, as well as in the sewages and in the wastewaters. Agriculture is another major source of pollution, and households themselves are a huge source of pollution. Anything that goes down the toilet, let's say, goes back into surface and groundwaters. So a lot of the contaminants that we currently find in the waters in the West are pharmaceutical residues, household cleaning products residues, cosmetical residues coming from cosmetics and skincare products, as well as pesticides and industrial dyes and all these sort of things.
It's very interesting that everybody knows about agriculture and industry, but it's so interesting you also include the pharmaceutical industry as part of this.
Well, imagine you take a medication and the medication itself is gonna go through your body. It's probably gonna, the body's gonna metabolize it. So the original compound is gonna be degraded into metabolites and into different compounds. But then these compounds themselves, this is more true for certain medications compared to others. But once you pee or like, you go to the toilet, and then this goes back released into the environment. And hasn't been metabolized within your body is probably going to take a while to metabolize within the environment as well. And another example is, for example, the skincare products and things. They're made for external use. So all these compounds, they don't really degrade. And once you wash it off your face or your body, they go into the wastewaters, and they're still like the same compound, most likely, than they were in the original place. And a lot of these compounds and chemicals are very persistent, so they take quite a long time to degrade within the environment. And what might not be highly toxic for us can be very toxic for aquatic life. So a lot of these chemicals coming from industry, pharmaceuticals, households, they're very toxic to aquatic life. And we see this it's quite a problem now. The oceans are polluted, the rivers are polluted, and this doesn't only disrupt the disruption is at many levels. So we can see in the microcosms, and we can see like the soil and water's microbiomes, at many levels.
I hear you. Actually, if you make me think about it, of course, everybody knows about sun lotions, right?
Yes.
Sun lotions is a major one. Yeah. And also, I remember reading about the contraceptive pill.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So
like the major pharmaceutical compounds, of course, like the more we use this, the pharmaceuticals that are used the most are the ones that are also present the most within the waters. So non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, antidepressants, contraceptive pills, and all these sort of medications are highly present within the environment, because we as humans consume a lot of them.
Yeah, I see. When I was studying nutrition, one of the sort of subjects that we paid lots of attention on is so-called endocrine disruptors.
Yes.
So it's the effect that different chemicals and compounds found in the environment can have a direct effect on your hormones.
Yes.
And that's a minefield, literally. It's not really something that is very enjoyable to read.
No, not at all.
So in Copenhagen, we always try to, at least myself, I like to keep you happy as much as possible, but it's very important that we also bring forward some good messages, Yes. I think that, the environment is possibly the most, mistreated, area of life, and one of those at least. And why not talking about water and general pollution? So you said agriculture, industrial. Very lucky here indeed in Copenhagen. There's no industries at all. Very little agriculture, and I think there is potential for organic agriculture here. Absolutely.
Here it's possible because we don't have intensive agriculture. So the problem, for example, in Northern Thailand, where I'm doing my PhD research, is the fact that the source of water is one. Usually it comes from upstream on the mountains, and it flows down until it reaches the valley. And any field that it comes in contact with that is contaminated with pesticides, the water will carry this information down in the valley. So even though the fields that I'm researching on, there hasn't been any pesticides applied for 5 years. When I did my preliminary testing, I found more than 100 pesticide compounds both in the soil and in the water. So there we don't really have an option for organic agriculture because the environment is so contaminated that even though you don't directly spray pesticides, they're still present within the environment.
I hear you for sure. Yes, it's really interesting what you're telling us. Indeed, if I consume non-organic vegetables, I wash them very, very well with baking soda, typically, and of course, lots of nutrition is found in the skin. But if I rarely buy apples, for instance, although I love apples because of the beautiful fruit that we have here, the local fruit. But sometimes I get New Zealand apples, and sometimes I also remove the skin. But it's a shame because indeed, on one side the skin brings lots of nutrients. On the other side, it also brings the pollutants. Is baking soda okay, at least to limit the amount?
Yes, because most pesticides are oil-based. So if we just rinsed our vegetables and fruits under tap water, which is contaminated itself in most of cases, especially in the Western world, because especially in big cities where the population is so concentrated, tap water is really not safe to drink. It should be at least filtered. And also because of chlorination. Chlorination is another huge problem. But in terms of pesticides are oil-based. So if we just wash them with tap water, water and oils don't mix. And most of them are oil-based because otherwise every time it rains, the fruit or the vegetables will just get the wash off. So baking soda is a good way, is the most cheapest, I would say, and effective way to remove the outer layers of pollutants, of pesticides. There is a lot of regulations around pesticides, and usually, especially in developed countries, the traces amounts of pesticides that reach the final products that enters the food chain should be below the maximum residues limits that have no direct impact on human health, let's say.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely baking soda is a cheap and effective way. There is also quite a bit of scientific research that proving that it does reduce the amounts of pesticides on the outer layers. The problem with a lot of the research and a lot of this like thresholds and limits is that they never consider multiple chemicals acting together.
Yeah.
And this is the problem because farmers use a combination of chemicals because they different pests attack different parts of the plant, so they cannot just use like one insecticide. They're going to use an insecticide, a fungicide, a herbicide, and then we don't really have toxicology data on the synergistic effects, so on the combined effects of all these chemicals within the human body as well as in the environment.
It's a concept which is very well known in nutrition, the concept of the toxic burden, we call it in nutrition. So it's the same thing for foods, you know, maybe a specific compound found like a flavor enhancer, let's call it, or some sort of preservative found in food, they don't test, and on its own it's kind of okay, you know, within certain thresholds, etc. But then when people eat junk food, they get, I was looking at Doritos, for instance, which is, as ultra-processed food, very popular snack in the US, 30 ingredients, half of them, I don't know where they're coming from, but probably the factory. And can you imagine? So maybe on its own, Doritos is okay, but then if you add, a Mars bar, a Mars bar, and then you add some cola of some sort, and then you add, all sorts of other toxins coming on, the toxic burden builds up, and then on top of that you got the water, and then maybe you live in a big city. I lived in London for a long time, right? And the pollution of a big city, in terms of air pollution, is terrible. I remember London, the water was very hard, so some people were complaining about their hair as well, the quality of the hair after using London water.
If the water is very hard and if the water is highly chlorinated, which is in most cities around the world, it can be quite detrimental, especially for the skin. Like sometimes we tend to forget that the skin is our largest organ and is the most vulnerable one because it's constantly exposed to the external environment. And so chlorination itself has been a huge progress for the elimination of many water diseases that used to affect the human race, until 100 years ago, let's say. But at the same time, when chlorine is used as a disinfectant in water, it reacts with organic matter. So any nature's debris, let's say, like trunks from trees or leaves or animal matter or any sort of organic matter it comes in contact with, it highly reacts with chlorine, and this creates disinfection byproducts. And these disinfection byproducts are highly toxic compounds, and they're classified as human carcinogens by the major bodies like the US Environmental Protection Agency and as well as the European one. So we use chlorine to disinfect our water, but the byproduct of disinfection is more toxic than what was in there before, So it's, but what I would like to say is that drinking or being exposed to contaminated water for a day or a week is what is going to adversely affect our health. The real issues come when this exposure is over a very long period of time.
Sure.
So chronic exposure to low levels of contaminants. Most of these contaminants will be below the thresholds. Some of them are unfortunately higher than the thresholds, but it's the constant exposure, and as you said, like all this toxin coming together, we don't really know the synergistic effects of the combinations, and this is what causes adverse health effects.
Well, what we know is that cancer rates are very high, and you have, the burden of chronic disease, so-called, is not really diminishing at all.
No.
And obviously, there are always genetic components in any disease. Well, the environmental and lifestyle components are huge, and we know that, right? And of course, having a healthy lifestyle where you have a sensible exposure to the sun, where you have a clean environment as much as possible, where you have a physical activity, good quality, whole food, etc., can contribute to a healthier life for longer.
Yes.
And water should definitely be considered as well. So tell us specifically what kind of measures people should be doing if they are based in London, for instance, and they want to take care of their health a little bit more with regards to water in particular.
So if you have the possibility, I would say get your water tested. Get your water tested for heavy metals, and if there is chlorine or not, it's quite easy to say, let's say. You can probably smell it, or you can buy residual chlorine drops. These are very cheap, and they can be found like any hardware store, and you can just put a few drops of in water, and if the color changes to yellow or orange, this is an indication that there is chlorine in the water. But on the other side, like for drinking water purposes, bottled water is simply filtered tap water. Like any bottled, like any water company, let's say, or water brand, they don't produce the water. They either produce the glass or the plastic, and then they take tap water and they filter it, usually by reverse osmosis. Some of them also apply like UV disinfection, and then they bottle it up. And the water itself might be quite clean when it's bottled up, but we have no idea of the time frame between when the water is put in the bottle and when the consumer actually drinks it.
Yeah.
And this time lapse is very important, because depending on what environmental condition the bottles are exposed to, this can cause different types of chemicals to leach into the water, especially if it's in plastic.
So how about like a very highly prized and famous Evian, or like spring water, or like San Pellegrino in the glass bottle? A little bit better? Or?
Glass bottles are a little bit better, but there is some research that indicating, for example, if the cap of the glass bottle is made with PVC or has a PVC lining, this leaches into the water and sort of gives us the same results as plastic bottled water.
Okay, so possibly the best solution is to have a water filter at home. Is that? I remember in the UK a very famous, a very basic and affordable one is the Brita filter,
Yes.
And I had it for very many years, but then I always forgot to change the filter after a while.
Yeah, that's also very important. Like if we have a filter, we need to take care of it. There is many types of water filters available in the market now.
How did you end up in Kopangan, and why Kopangan?
So Kopangan, before I live in Pai, which is in the north of Thailand.
Lovely, Pai is a lovely place.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful place. Unfortunately, during this season, there's a lot of burnings in Pai. It's called smoky season. So the air pollution is really bad. And last year, I got trapped there because of COVID. So we had no escape. We couldn't escape. And this year, there was another lockdown threat coming at the start of January. So I escaped as fast as I could, because I didn't want to, as we said, like air is a fundamental element. And I didn't want to expose myself to another 6 months of extreme air pollution. So
plus lockdown at the same time.
Yes. So yeah, I came here, and I'm very happy I did, because it's such a beautiful and lovely place.
Sure, indeed. And what are your plans for the future? Do you have any set plans, or you're going with the flow at the moment? I know many people are going with the flow a little bit because of the uncertainty of the world. Yeah. How about you?
My next year is quite planned out. And then after that, I look forward to not having any more obligations. But so this last year is going to be the last year of my PhD. So in May, I'm going back north, and I'm going to start my research as the rain comes. So my research is quite linked with the rainy season and rice cultivation. So yeah, in May, I'm going to go back up north and start my research and collect all my data. I'm going to graduate next year for sure.
Sounds great. You know, that's always good to do. You know,
Yes.
graduate, so you get your full certifications, your PhD doctor, and that's great. As with regards to myself, can I tell you my plan now? Well, my plan is to live in Copenhagen forever, obviously. But what I like to do in the future as well is maybe to rent a piece of land and ask a local person to help me and do my own vegetable garden. I think it's a very affordable thing to do in Copenhagen, and I don't know why I haven't done it yet.
My experiments are going to be successful in the next coming month. Then I can definitely help you to make your water irrigation system a lot more efficient and to rebalance the ecosystem so that the plants can absorb the right nutrients and the right humidity from the air and the soil and everything else. As I mentioned before, like here, the water and the soil seem pretty good. Well, the soil actually I can't say for sure because I haven't personally looked at it, but a simple soil nutrition analysis, which is very cheap to do as well, that can reveal a lot about the quality of the soil. And then from these results, we can implement like different nutrients or also decide on which type of crop is best for this type of soil. Because different crops require different soils, they require different waters, different levels of waters. So yeah, the soil can tell us a lot.
And it's a good thing also to talk to some local person who's been doing this for a long time, because I really like traditional ways of doing things as well. So being able to possibly merge the high-tech testing with a traditional view of growing crops, that's possibly the best. Same in nutrition, you know, like you can do the testing and you can apply science to nutrition, but also, you know, looking at Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, and just the way your grandmother was cooking, you know, sometimes is very useful as well. Well, Tayo, thank you very much for this little chat, and best of luck for, you know, the completion of your studies, and nice to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Cool.